Hi, I'm Renee, and I'm doing this video series on my powerful year. And I thought before we dive deeper into what is happening in my powerful year, I wanted to talk a little bit about fear because um, transition, change of any sort tends to activate our fear. And of course, the day that I made the decision to move to France back in March of 2024, I made that decision. It wasn't because I didn't have any fear. I had plenty. It was because I made the decision to step forward anyway. And but in I couldn't just not acknowledge the fears that I had. I needed to take a step back and spend time with them and begin to figure out what were they, and I needed to figure out whose were they. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that process today and how I have evolved into using fear as a teacher to allow me to stay in my power. I hope you'll stick around till the end. So on that day when I made the decision, I had to sit with the fact that there was a part of me that thought that this decision was just too big. It was too much. Um, like, who was I to think that I could get rid of all of my things and move to a different country, a different continent, a different way of living and being in it, all in a different language. And like, who was I to think that I could do that? And I remembered sitting with that thought and hearing a voice in my head that wasn't mine. And that voice was saying, "You're being too big for your britches." And that voice was my grandmother. And she was dropping in and reminding me that many, many years ago, I had told her about this dream of moving to France. I think I was in 8th or ninth grade when I just dropped this little bomb on her that it was my intention that after I graduated, at some point, like, I was moving to France. I was just certain of it. And I remember that conversation that day. She informed me that that plan was just being too big for my britches. That plan was too big. That plan was not at all in the plan that was expected of me. And, you know, the day I'm making this decision to move to France, I think I was 60 at the time and 61 at the time, something like that. And like, how could how could that belief of my grandmother's drop in and still be influencing me? And yet, there it was. I was being too big for my britches. Thank you, Grandma Erna. So, with Grandma Erna's message that day, I was reminded that not all fear is mine. There's programmed fear. So, things that we are taught over and over again that we develop a belief around that we hold on to. a fear of stepping out and getting hit by a car, perhaps. But it, in my grandmother's messaging, there was a bit of programmed fear in that because she had told me that more than one occasion, related to a whole host of things in life that were just too big for my britches to even think about. And so there was some programming in that, but there was also some projection in that because she couldn't see that big of a dream for herself. So therefore, she couldn't see that big of a dream for anyone else either. Um, my grandmother, bless her soul, she was a big teacher in my life, and not necessarily some easy lessons, but she has definitely helped me as I've embodied the lessons that she so brutally did teach me, has helped me in this process of really stepping into my own powerful self. Um, Something that I'm very sorry to say I don't think she ever really did for herself. But so there was a lot of projected fear. So her fears being laid on myself, my sisters, my mother, like passed down through that maternal line, were projected fears. I know that she had projected fears from her mother and her mother's mother. It was a much different time in the lives of women for sure. And she could not see the possibility that women could live differently, expand differently. And it was funny because she was also somebody who always told me I could do anything I ever wanted. Like, she was very supportive in that regard. There was always messaging that you can be anything you want to be. When I was smaller, she would say that. And then, of course, when it came time to make those decisions, I was very much told that my choices were doctor, lawyer, and accountant. Like, those were the acceptable options from my grandmother. But that was projection. Like, she could only see those as successful options. But then I fast forward, I find myself in the early years of university, and suddenly I'm getting the when are you going to get married? Because for my grandmother, there was a very laid out path. That plan was set in stone and you did not veer off of that. So my dream of moving to France, marriage wasn't really something that was on my agenda. I was very much kind of a gypsy soul as a kid. I still am. I love to travel, and I did not want to be kind of clamped down in any way, shape, or form. So, but those projected fears were coming at me all through my growing up years. So, programmed fears, projected fears, and then we have the collective fear. Right now, there's plenty of fear in the collective around artificial intelligence, politics, the economy, all kinds of collective fear. And there can also just be collective fears in your friends group. I have a fabulous group of friends here, but we're all, getting older. And sometimes it's like that messaging, if you keep hearing it, people are, afraid of aging, afraid of getting sick, afraid of their bodies breaking down. It tends to be this continual messaging. And if you begin to just take that in and begin to believe, oh, wow, like at my age, things might begin to break down, we create our own reality, right? So taking on collective fear will not serve you. Rejecting it is really important. So we have programmed fears, projected fears, and collective fears. And knowing what kind of fear you're dealing with allows you to look at it from a place of empowerment and see what it's there to teach you. Let's talk more about that. So, once we know what kind of fear we're dealing with, it's time to get really discerning with the fear. Excuse me. Um, so, when I mean discerning, I want to know, what is this fear? Why is it showing up right now? Why do I feel it? Because fear is a felt sense in our body. And, what is my body trying to tell me through this fear? Now, if it's a collective fear, it may just be something that's showing up from that collective. And so if I step back from it and go, okay, like AI, I could have all kinds of fear around AI, and and yet it's everywhere. And or I could flip the table on it, and rather than staying ignorant to it, I could suddenly start to ask myself things like, what could I use AI for? What could I learn about AI? Like, how could I leverage AI? And just, rather than staying a victim to it, become empowered and decide that it's just a tool. And but take a different perspective to flip the power on it. Politics, I could be entirely powerless in a fear around the political landscape. But the truth is, if I use my own discernment and I look at what I know to be true about my life and my circumstances, what about politics do I have to fear? Nothing. It's a collective fear, and I understand why there's a collective fear, but I don't need to embody that collective fear. I don't need to allow that collective fear to take me off my calm center. I don't need to give that collective fear my power. That I'm not going to do. So if I don't understand a collective fear, I try to find out like more about it. Like, I recently took an AI course to understand more about it, to see how I could leverage it as a tool. It made me much more powerful in my relationship to it, rather than staying kind of head in the sand, hoping it goes away. Like, that's not going to happen. I want to feel empowered. I want to know. I want to learn, and then decide how I'm going to relate to it. So, just a couple of examples of collective fears. Discerning what's a projected fear, what's a programmed fear. I like to just sit down and begin to ask questions of myself around this fear. Like, if I have a fear that's showing up, like my move to France, what of this fear is actually true? Like, what do I know to be true? So when I made my decision to move to France, of course, I had all this fear about what if I failed? What if I wasn't successful? What if I lost everything? Kind of catastrophizing, initially. And I had to sit there and go, okay, I have this fear about moving. What do I know to be true? Well, I know the visa process. I know the steps I need to follow. Okay. I know how that will work. Do I know what life's going to be like when I get there? Well, yeah, I knew some things. I knew where I was going to be living initially. I knew that I was going to have a car. I knew that Paolo was going to go with me, and I knew everything about that process. And the fact of the matter was, when I sat down and I looked at everything I did know, I knew enough to know that that first year was, while it wouldn't be easy, I also did not have that much to fear from it. I knew enough to be solid in it. So I used that discernment to counteract the fear. It didn't make the fear go away. It stayed there, but it gave me a little bit of power over it so that I could continue to walk through it. Okay. So knowing what you've got in terms of projected fear, programmed fear, collective fear, super important in the process of discernment and discerning what's true for you. Like when I looked at that fear that was my grandmother's voice in my head, once I realized that it was my grandmother's projected fear on me, then poof, the fear was gone. I didn't have to worry about my move to France being something too big for me. I didn't hold that as my truth. That wasn't my fear, that was hers. So I could discern that and get rid of it. And once you kind of play with this, sitting down with what you know to be true, you'll be amazed at how many fears are from other sources, and they do tend to fall away as soon as you deal with the truth of it, the truth of what you do know. And the other thing that helped me, a little nugget I want to leave you with, is if you focus on, do I know the next most important thing that I can do to address that fear? That in and of itself is a powerful step. If you know that and then follow that step, you gain confidence that you can walk right through that fear, and the fear just lessens and kind of falls away as you practice that. If you know that next most important thing, those are the types of fears and how to use discernment on them. Okay, so to wrap up here, I want to leave you with a few thoughts. I have decided in my powerful year that I'm using fear as a tool. I want to look at the fears that come up. I want to figure out whose they are. Are they mine? Are they collective? Are they programmed? Are they projected from my family or even friends? Um, and once I do that, I sit with that truth and I walk through that discernment practice. And and I'm also looking for, what is this fear trying to teach me? What is it trying to do in terms of is it trying to get me to slow down and look at something a little bit deeper? Is it trying to slow me down and get me to listen to my own intuition about this fear? I am using fear as a teacher, not as a deterrent. It doesn't mean that I'm going to allow the fear to make the final decision. That's not happening. That's not powerful. But I am going to use the fear as a teacher, as a tool, to guide me. Obviously, if I walked outside and there was a tiger at my door, I would want that initial reaction of fear to show up so I could go back inside, uh, so I could call for help. But I don't want, like I said, I want to use fear as a teacher and as a tool to help guide me, not to dissuade me. Fear does not get to be the decision maker in my life. Fear can be an informant, can be informative in my process of making a decision, but it doesn't get power over me anymore. So I will leave you with that. If you are following me along on this challenge of taking on 2026 and making it your powerful year, I hope that this video you find helpful, that you will also consider using fear as a teacher informing your decisions, but you will not allow it to dissuade you from going after your dreams. I will leave it there. A biento. Have a great day.